everybody, Elizabeth Johnston here, your story and creativity coach. I'm super excited today to be talking to Natalie Grignon, and we're here to talk about story and the entrepreneur. But before we dive into that, Natalie, welcome, and please tell us a little bit about what you do and who you serve.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Grignon. I am an investment advisor. I've been in the financial field for 16 years. But I'm also an author. I wrote a couple of books, and I also have a designation that almost nobody else has in Quebec, which is CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. I can help lawyers and couples going through divorce and divorce cases. But as an investment advisor, my biggest passion is financial literacy. What I try to point out with everybody that I meet is that investing in the stock market does not have to be scary.
Ooh, intriguing. Alrighty. So we've worked together before, and you've got several books out now. I'm wondering, for you as an investment advisor, working in the corporate world with clients and that sort of thing, what role or importance do you see story taking in your career and in your business?
That's a really good question, because one of the main reasons that I worked with you to write my first book was because I was, I realized that there's a lot of lack of financial literacy in schools, and I was doing my workshops, and everybody says that we only retain about 10% of what the person says. So my goal to write the first book was to actually just, for the people to have something in their hands when they leave. So my first book, it's not stories. It's really just, simple information about budgeting and interest and inflation and investments. But I wanted, the teenagers or whoever came to my workshops to leave with something. But then, I realized that people, they retain numbers, right? I can give them facts and I can give them numbers. But what they retain the most is the stories that I attach to whatever I'm talking about. And I'll give you an example. In my book, I talk about, how at 15, my son thought, he could move out at 18 with a part-time job, going to school and living on his own and having a car. And I was like, buddy, come on. You can't, nowadays, it would be very difficult to live on your own in an apartment at 18 with a part-time job, going to school. The cost of living is, of course it goes up every year, right? So, and then, in the book, I always also discuss that, my son, he would go on not TikTok back then, but Instagram and Facebook, and he would see 20-year-olds driving Lamborghinis. And kids, they think, it's normal to have a Lamborghini by 20, and you just, go on YouTube and Instagram and make money that way. And, I can talk about all day about budgeting and about, saving money as much as possible, spending less, living below your means. But people will remember the stories more than anything else. So they remember the story of my son, right? And if they realize, that's something that they should think about in their life with their budgeting, I'm not sure, but they remember the stories, right?
Right. And you have this great story about a woman who reached out to you like a year later or something, and it was the story that she remembered and attached to your name. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So I think it was about 2 years ago when I did a conference for International Women's Day. And even that conference, I don't remember how long it was. It was probably 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something. And again, I could talk about, what I do with my expertise of CDFA, and I can talk about it and what I do and technical and whatever, all that analysis. But it was actually, the stories that I talk about, right? Like I was talking about a case where, an ex-husband was declaring a revenue of 25, but in reality he was making much more. And I was telling the story of how, I was found, I found tax evasion even. So people will remember the stories because it resonates with them, right? If you hear a story and some part of it resonates with you, and you almost like you understand like the part of the story, because you almost like you know yourself in that story, or you know it makes you think of somebody in your life. You will remember stories. You're not going to remember statistics, you're not going to remember numbers, you're not going to remember exactly what I do, what type of analysis, what I use to make my analysis, but you'll remember the story of that woman who's been fighting in the courts for 10 years, and the ex-husband was declaring, you know, revenue of 25, 35, but in reality he's making 120. So when you hear stories like that, you remember them, right? Because you know we all know somebody going through a divorce. We all know somebody who, you know, wants to receive child support, but the other person is trying to avoid it. So the stories, it's funny, it's the stories that we remember, right? It's never the statistics itself, or you know, they say that you always remember how the person made you feel, but also you'll remember the stories that they told more than their names. You won't remember their names or whatever, right? So it's funny how, you know, that woman that reached out a year later, it's because she remembered that story, and I had given her, of course, my business card. But people remember stories, you know, and they could be funny, they could be, you know, sad, whatever. But stories resonates with people.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about that story is that when you shared like a real story of a client that you work with and how you help them, it really has that beginning, middle, and end. You know, somebody had a problem, you came in to help them with a problem, and you achieved a certain level of success, right? And so it completes that loop, and that's what people remember too. It's they might remember like, oh, there's this horrible thing that happened, but in terms of like finding a person who can help them, if they find themselves in that same situation, they will remember that story that you told them about how this client had a problem, came to you, and you helped them solve it. So I think that's the power of the story and the way that it resonates, you know? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because when we have clients, even other professionals, right? Like the accountants or the doctors, when we have clients, and yes, it's true, when we meet them, there's a problem and then we take care of it. And then there's the ending. But us professionals, we don't see that as a story. Right.
Right.
And it's exactly what you just said. But when, you know, and then somebody might be fearful of approaching a professional because they think that their problems, you know, nobody will understand, or, you know, their problems are unique. Yeah, we each have our own unique circumstances, unique problems. But, you know, humans, we all live, you know, we all live similar things. And so it's funny how I see them as clients and they often become friends, but
Mm-hmm.
somebody like you sees that as a story, right? It's true. It is a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. So yeah, there's a story, I guess, in all of us in every situation. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah, cool. And so in the process of writing your books, how did that process help you maybe understand what you do in a different way or deeper way? What was the transformation for you in writing those books?
Well, so just writing the book itself, I can tell you that that could be overwhelming, right? Because when you're not an author, well, you don't consider yourself an author and you want to write your first book. So, of course, meeting with you was a tremendous help because I had all the ideas in my head of what I wanted to put down. And, you know, one session with you, you know, that was it. I was done. I knew exactly how I was going to write my book. And writing that book made me realize that, well, I knew that things had to be simplified to talk to people, right? Because, you know, nobody's ever impressed with an investment advisor who says big words, you know, and they try to seem to tell you to trust them, but they don't really explain things. Nobody's impressed with that anymore, you know. But writing that book confirmed that simplifying things as much as possible, because especially in finance, right? People feel bad or embarrassed when they don't know something about finance. But not everybody has to know everything about finance, right? And it's okay to ask those questions about what's a budget, what's an interest, what's a dividend, what's a mutual fund. Those questions are valid. Those questions, you can have them, as young as 13 or 20, 40, 50. It doesn't matter what age you are. So even though the title of my book is Wealth 101 for Teenagers, it is actually for everybody. And for me, it was a confirmation that things need to be simplified in finance. But at the same time, it also confirmed that when you have a book and you're sharing stories, and it could add credibility to what you're doing. It certainly adds visibility. There's maybe a wow factor. And of course, I didn't do that for that. That was not my main goal. My main goal was to have something written down for people to have. But it confirmed that for me, that having something written down is something that, people can always get back to that. And then if they buy your book and they like it and they learn something, they'll share it. A business card, you can lose it, you can throw it out, but a book, you'll share it with somebody, right? Even if you learned one thing or even one thing that you loved about it, you'll share it.
Yeah, you're so right. So we're just about to wrap up now. Are there any last minute thoughts or something that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers about the power of story in your business?
Well, so every conference that I've done, or even meetings with people, I try to bring like a story. People will remember stories, and it's a part that it's something that connects us to the other person, right? When you're sharing a personal story, it adds to that connection. So no matter what you are, like, especially for the people who are very analytical or very corporate, and they don't think that they need to share stories in the business, you're wrong. Sharing stories is what connects us to people, and connections and collaborations, that's really the future. So the power of storytelling is amazing.
I love that. Stories connect us. That's a great way to wrap up today.
Right.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It was lovely to speak to you.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.